Rain poured heavily over the glass city skyline of New York as Emily Carter stood inside her father's old office, her trembling hands clutching a piece of paper that changed her life forever. The smell of ink and old wood filled the room, but all she could focus on were the words written in bold: marriage agreement between Emily Carter and Alexander Knight. Her father's voice, weak but cold, echoed in her ears. "It's the only way, Emily. They'll take everything if we don't." She wanted to scream, to say that she didn't care about the debts or the family name. But when she saw her mother silently crying in the corner, Emily swallowed her fear. She knew this wasn't just about money. It was about survival. Alexander Knight. The name alone carried weight in America's richest circles. He was a billionaire who built his empire from nothing, feared by competitors and avoided by the press. They called him the Iron Heart of Wall Street. No one dared to cross him. People said he never smiled, never loved, never trusted, and now he was buying her freedom. Emily was 23, fresh out of college, still dreaming of becoming a writer. But dreams didn't matter when your family was drowning in debt. Alexander had offered to clear everything in exchange for a 1-year marriage contract. She had never met him in person, only seen him once in a news photo. Tall, broad shoulders, dark hair, and those cold gray eyes that looked like they could see straight through you. People said he was ruthless. Some even said he was cruel. But in that photo, Emily had seen something else: loneliness. The black car arrived exactly at midnight. A man in a gray suit opened the door. "Miss Carter, Mr. Knight is expecting you." Her heart pounded as she stepped inside. The city lights blurred past the window as they drove through Manhattan, her mind racing with fear and confusion. What kind of man buys a stranger to marry him? When they reached his penthouse, she was struck silent. The place looked more like a museum than a home. Cold marble floors, silver decor, no signs of life. The man who stood waiting at the end of the hall looked exactly as she remembered from the photo: powerful, unreadable, and distant. "Miss Carter," he said, his deep voice smooth but emotionless. "You understand the agreement?" She nodded, her throat dry. 1 year, no interference in my personal affairs. Public appearances when required. In return, your family's debts are cleared. It wasn't a proposal. It was a transaction. "Yes," she whispered. He studied her face for a long moment, as if trying to find a reason to stop. But then he turned away. "Good. The wedding is tomorrow. You'll have your own room." And just like that, she became Mrs. Alexander Knight. The ceremony was private, no press, no family, just a quiet exchange of vows in a courthouse. Emily wore a simple white dress, her hands shaking as she slipped the ring on his finger. He didn't look at her once, not during the vows, not even when the judge pronounced them husband and wife. That night she stood by the giant windows of the penthouse, watching the rain fall over the city. She felt like she had sold her heart to a ghost. Alexander sat across the room, working silently on his laptop. The only sound was the faint tapping of keys. Finally, she spoke. "Why me?" He didn't look up. "You were convenient." His words cut through her like glass. But later, as she turned to go, he added quietly, "And you looked honest." I needed someone who wouldn't lie to my face. She didn't know what he meant then, but something in his tone told her that this man carried his own kind of pain. Days turned into weeks. They lived like strangers, sharing the same space, polite, distant, cold. Emily tried to find small traces of warmth in the penthouse: a forgotten book, a picture frame hidden on a shelf, an old record player that didn't seem to fit the rest of his world. She realized Alexander wasn't heartless, just guarded. He watched her sometimes, though he tried not to show it. When she made coffee in the morning, when she laughed softly at an old movie, when she stood on the balcony, lost in thought. Something about her quiet strength unsettled him. He had bought her to solve a problem, not to feel anything. One evening, during a charity event they attended together, reporters surrounded them, cameras flashing. Emily smiled politely, playing her role. When one journalist asked her if she loved her husband, she froze, unsure what to say. But before she could answer, Alexander placed his hand gently on her back and said, "Of course she does." It wasn't the words, it was the way he said them. Cremage, protective, almost tender. Later that night, as they returned home, Emily whispered, "You didn't have to say that." "I know," he replied, his voice low. "But I wanted to." For the first time, their eyes met, really met. The coldness in his gray eyes softened just a little, and something unspoken passed between them. But before Emily could understand it, he turned away again, retreating into his office. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, wondering who the real Alexander Knight was. The ruthless billionaire, or the man who silently shielded her from the cameras. She didn't know yet that his walls were built from heartbreak, that years ago. Someone he trusted had betrayed him, leaving scars deeper than money could heal. And she didn't know that, slowly, without meaning to. Alexander was beginning to care. Emily woke up to the smell of fresh coffee one morning, surprised to find a cup already waiting for her on the kitchen counter. The note beside it read, "You mentioned you liked vanilla." It was the first kind gesture Alexander had shown since their marriage. She smiled without meaning to. Maybe the feared billionaire wasn't as heartless as the world believed. Days passed, and life in the penthouse slowly began to change. Alexander still worked long hours, buried in meetings and calls. But he started to talk to her, short conversations about her day, her writing, or even the weather. It was awkward at first, like two strangers learning a language neither fully understood. But it was a start. One evening, as they sat across from each other during dinner, Emily asked, "Do you ever take a day off?" He looked up from his plate, almost amused. "Are expensive." She laughed softly. "So is losing your soul?" For the first time, he smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "You think I've lost mine?" "I think you've locked it away," she said gently. He didn't reply, but his silence said enough. That night, he didn't work. Instead, he stood on the balcony with her, watching the city lights flicker below. It was strange how peaceful it felt to share the same air, the same view without words. Emily could feel the distance between them shrinking, even if just a little. But Alexander's world wasn't built for peace. The next morning, a headline flashed across the news: "Billionaire Alexander Knight in a secret marriage. Who is Emily Carter?" Her phone rang nonstop. Reporters camped outside the building. His PR team flooded in, panicked. Emily felt her chest tighten. She hadn't asked for this life. The cameras, the rumors, the lies. When she walked into his office, he was already on the phone, his voice cold. "Handle it." No comments. She hesitated at the door. "They're saying horrible things about me," she whispered. He looked up, guilt flickering in his eyes. "They always do. Ignore them." But ignoring wasn't easy. By evening, social. Media was full of her pictures, strangers calling her a gold digger, a liar, a nobody. When she couldn't take it anymore, she packed her bag quietly and walked to the elevator. But before the doors could close, Alexander appeared, his voice firm. "Where are you going?" "I don't belong in your world," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "I was never supposed to." He stepped closer, his tone softer now. "You think I don't know that? I didn't bring you here to hurt you." "Then why did you bring me here?" she asked, her voice shaking. He paused, searching for words he had never spoken. "Because I needed someone I could trust." It wasn't the answer she expected, but it was honest. And in that honesty, she saw the truth he'd been hiding. He was a man surrounded by power, but starved of peace. Later that night, she found herself sitting beside him in silence. The storm outside mirrored the one inside both of them. After a long pause, she said softly, "You don't have to protect your heart from me, Alexander." He didn't respond. But the way his hand brushed against hers on the couch told her he heard every word. The days that followed brought quiet moments of connection. They had breakfast together, laughed about little things, even watched old black and white movies late at night. Emily learned that he loved classical music but hated small talk. That he had once played piano before business consumed his life. That he had grown up poor and had fought for every inch of success he had. He, in turn, learned that she wrote stories about love, loss, and courage, and that she believed kindness was not weakness. He listened to her read one evening, and for the first time in years, he looked at someone not with calculation, but with admiration. Still, something in him stayed hidden, a shadow that crossed his eyes whenever his phone rang from a number he didn't want to answer. One night, as they shared quiet dinner, a woman's voice echoed through the speakerphone. "You can't ignore me forever, Alex," the voice said coldly. "You owe me that much." Emily froze. Alexander's jaw tightened. "This isn't a good time, Claire. Who's the girl then?" The woman sneered. "Your latest charity project?" He ended the call without another word, but Emily could see the storm behind his calm face. "Who was that?" she asked gently. "No one that matters anymore," he replied, though his eyes betrayed him. He, in turn, learned that she wrote stories about love, loss, and courage, and that she believed kindness was not weakness. He listened to her read one evening, and for the first time in years, he looked at someone not with calculation, but with admiration still. Something in him stayed hidden, a shadow that crossed his eyes whenever his phone rang from a number he didn't want to answer. One night, as they shared quiet dinner, a woman's voice echoed through the speakerphone. "You can't ignore me forever, Alex," the voice said coldly. "You owe me that much." Emily froze. Alexander's jaw tightened. "This isn't a good time, Claire. Who's the girl then?" The woman sneered. "Your latest charity project." He ended the call without another word, but Emily could see the storm behind his calm face. "Who was that?" she asked gently. "No one that matters anymore," he replied, though his eyes betrayed him. But it did matter. That night, he didn't come home. Emily stayed awake, staring at the empty space beside her. For the first time, she realized she cared deeply, painfully. She had fallen for a man she wasn't supposed to love. When he returned the next morning, his face was pale, his eyes tired. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "Claire was my ex-fiancée. She didn't take our marriage well." Emily looked at him, unsure what to say. "Do you still love her?" He shook his head. "No, I just don't know how to stop being angry at her." There was something fragile in the way he said it, not weakness, but honesty. And that honesty broke something inside her, too. Over the next few weeks, they grew closer, slowly, naturally. He began to wait for her at breakfast. She started writing again, often sitting by his side as he worked. The distance that once defined them began to fade. But the world outside didn't stop. Rumors grew louder. Claire began to appear in headlines again, whispering to the media that Alexander's marriage was a sham. And soon one of those stories reached Emily. A cruel article calling her the girl who sold herself for a fortune. It hurt, but what hurt more was seeing Alexander's face when she confronted him. "Is that what everyone believes?" she asked quietly. His voice was low. "Let them believe what they want. We know the truth." But Emily wasn't sure anymore. Was it all still a contract? Or had something real begun between them? Late that night, she found him sitting alone by the window, staring at the skyline. She walked up and said softly, "You built a life where everyone fears you, Alexander. But fear isn't love." He turned to her, his voice heavy with regret. "And love only ever destroyed me." She wanted to tell him it didn't have to, that he wasn't the same man who'd been betrayed years ago. But before she could, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Claire. Emily took a deep breath, realizing this wasn't just about business or money anymore. This was about his past, the one thing she couldn't compete with as she walked away. Alexander called her name, but she didn't turn around. Behind her, he whispered to himself, "I never meant to fall for you." Emily. The next morning, Emily woke up to silence. Alexander had already left, and the penthouse felt colder than usual. His absence hung in the air like a weight she couldn't shake off. She tried to distract herself with writing. But her mind kept replaying the words he'd whispered the night before, "I never meant to fall for you." She didn't know if he had truly said it or if her heart had just imagined it. Either way, it was too late. She had fallen for him completely and quietly. By noon, her phone buzzed. It was an invitation, a charity gala hosted by the Night Corporation. Her presence was required, according to the message from his assistant. Emily sighed. She wasn't ready to face a world that saw her as a bought bride. But she also knew Alexander's reputation was on the line. She couldn't hide forever. That night, when she entered the grand ballroom, all eyes turned toward her. She wore a deep blue gown, simple but elegant, and carried herself with quiet grace. Cameras flashed. Whispers followed her like a shadow. She felt the pressure of every stare until she saw him, Alexander, standing at the center of the crowd. Tall, composed, and breathtaking in a black suit. When their eyes met, something unspoken passed between them. He walked toward her slowly, ignoring everyone else. "You look beautiful," he said softly. "Thank you," she replied, her heart racing. Throughout the evening, he stayed by her side, introducing her to business partners and investors. For the first time, she saw another side of him, calm, protective, even gentle. Every time someone tried to test her, he was there to deflect the question, his hand occasionally brushing hers in reassurance. But the peace didn't last long. Near the end of the gala, a familiar voice cut through the crowd. Well, so this is the famous Mrs. Knight." Emily turned to see Claire, tall, elegant, confident, the kind of woman who commanded attention without trying. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were cold. Alexander stiffened. "Claire, this isn't the place." "Oh, come on, Alex," she interrupted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Don't tell me you've fallen for your little charity project." The room went silent. Emily's chest tightened, but she stayed calm. "It's nice to meet you," she said quietly. "I've heard a lot about you." "I bet you have," Claire said, smirking. "Just be careful, sweetheart. He's good at pretending to care." Alexander's voice hardened. "That's enough." Claire gave a mocking smile and walked away, leaving whispers in her wake. Emily forced herself to stay composed, but inside, she was trembling. When they returned home, the silence between them was heavy. Emily finally turned to him. "Is that what I am to you?" "A project." He rubbed his forehead, exhausted. "No, but you weren't supposed to matter this much." "Then why does it feel like you're still letting her control you?" she asked, her voice breaking. Alexander looked at her, pain flickering in his eyes. "Because she's the one who taught me what betrayal feels like." He told her everything then. How years ago he'd been engaged to Claire, believing she loved him. But she had used him, leaking his company's secrets to his rivals, nearly destroying his business. The experience hardened him. He'd sworn never to trust again. "I built walls after that," he said quietly. "And then you came along, kind, honest, real. I didn't know what to do with that." Emily's eyes softened. "You don't have to fight me, Alexander. I'm not her." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "I know." The next few days were a strange calm. They didn't talk about the gala or Claire again. Instead, Alexander truly tried to let Emily into his world. He invited her to his office, asked for her opinion on projects, even surprised her with small gestures, a new notebook for her writing, a quiet dinner at home. Bit by bit, his walls began to crack. One afternoon, as she stood by his office window, she asked, "Do you ever think about what life could have been if you weren't so guarded?" He smiled faintly. "I think about it every day now." It was the closest thing to a confession he had ever given. That night, they sat on the balcony, watching the stars. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder, and for once, he didn't pull away. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. But peace never lasted long in Alexander Knight's world. The next morning, his assistant barged into the penthouse with bad news. Someone had leaked confidential information from his company again. Millions were at risk. Investors were panicking, and the leak came from an email under Emily's name. Emily stood frozen as Alexander read the report. disbelief in his eyes turning into quiet hurt. "Tell me this isn't true," he said. "It's not." She cried. "I didn't do anything." He wanted to believe her, every part of him did, but his past whispered otherwise. Claire had betrayed him the same way. Now the same pattern was repeating. "Maybe someone used my account," Emily said desperately. "Please, you have to trust me." He turned away, his voice breaking. "I want to, Emily, but I don't know how." The pain in his tone shattered her heart. "After everything we've been through, you still think I could hurt you?" He didn't answer. The silence was enough. Without another word, Emily walked out of the penthouse. The elevator doors closed between them, leaving Alexander standing alone, staring at the wedding ring on his hand. For days, she heard nothing from him. The media exploded again, calling her the woman who betrayed the Iron Heart. She didn't try to fight back. She was too tired, but she didn't give up. She started digging, desperate to prove her innocence. And soon she found a series of hidden files showing that the leak came from someone inside Knight Corporation. Someone with access to both her name and Alexander's systems. The culprit was clear. Claire. Emily gathered everything and went straight to his office. When she walked in, everyone fell silent. Alexander looked up, surprise and guilt flickering across his face. "I have proof," Spey said, placing the documents on his desk. It was her, Alexander, not me. He scanned the papers quickly, and his face paled as the truth sank in. Claire had framed Emily, just like she had once betrayed him. Emily's voice trembled. "I told you I'd never hurt you. But you didn't believe me?" He looked at her, regret in his eyes. "I was a fool. I let my fear ruin everything." Tears welled up in her eyes. "Maybe fear was never the problem. Maybe you just never learned how to love." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Emily, please, don't go." He took a step closer, his voice breaking. "I spent my whole life building walls to keep people out. And then you came and made me wish I hadn't." Her heart ached. She wanted to forgive him, but the wound was still fresh. "If you want me to stay, Alexander, then fight for me, not because of guilt, but because you actually care." He looked at her, his voice soft but certain. "Then I'll fight." For the first time, Emily saw something real in his eyes. Not fear, not pride, but love trying to find its way through the cracks. The storm over. Manhattan matched the one brewing inside Alexander Knight's world. The truth was, Claire had leaked his company secrets, using Emily's name to cover her tracks. But the damage was done. Investors were nervous, the media was ruthless, and Emily was gone. For 3 long days, Alexander barely slept. He couldn't focus on meetings or phone calls. Every room in the penthouse felt colder without her. Her laughter, her soft voice, the way she'd leave notes by the coffee machine, everything was gone. And for the first time in years, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel. Regret. He had built an empire with logic and control. But the one thing that truly mattered had slipped through his hands because of fear. He realized now that Emily had never been like Claire. She had loved him with honesty, and he had punished her for someone else's sins. When his assistant finally entered his office, she placed a file on his desk. "Sir, there's something you should see." Inside were final confirmation reports Claire had transferred company data to competitors and vanished overseas. Emily's name was cleared completely. Alexander closed his eyes, letting the truth sink in. He whispered, "I destroyed the only person who ever cared about me." Without wasting another moment, he left his office and went to find her. He didn't know where to start. Her phone was off. Her family home was empty. He checked everywhere: cafes she liked, bookstores she visited, even the small park where she used to sit and write. Days passed with no sign of her. He was losing hope when one of his drivers said, "Sir, there's a woman renting a small cabin upstate. Her name's Emily Carter." The next morning, Alexander drove through the rain to the quiet countryside. The road wound through pine trees and mist until he saw a small wooden cabin by a lake. There she was, standing on the porch, wrapped in a sweater, looking out at the water. For a moment, he didn't move. She looked peaceful, but there was sadness in her posture. He stepped out of the car and called her name softly, Emily. She turned, surprised. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then she said quietly, "Why are you here, Alexander?" "I came to apologize," he said simply. She crossed her arms, her tone steady but wounded. "You didn't trust me when it mattered. You thought I was just like her." "I was wrong," he admitted. "I let my past blind me. I built walls so high, even I couldn't climb them. But you broke through them anyway." Her eyes softened, but she looked away. "You can't fix trust with words." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to earn it." He took a step closer, his voice trembling slightly. "You changed me, Emily. You made me remember what it's like to feel again. I don't care about the company or the headlines. I just care about you." For a moment, the only sound was the rain hitting the lake. Then she said quietly, "You hurt me, Alexander. Not because you doubted me, but because I believed in you." Her words cut deeper than anything he'd heard before. He nodded slowly. "I know. And I'll spend as long as it takes to prove that I believe in you too." She didn't answer, but her eyes glistened with tears. He could see the conflict in her love fighting with pain. After a long silence, she finally said, "Come inside. You'll catch a cold." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. Inside the cabin was simple and warm. She handed him a towel, and he smiled faintly. "You really left everything behind," he said, glancing around. "I needed peace," she replied. "For once, I wanted to live a life that was mine." He nodded. "You deserve that. You've always deserved better than what I gave you." They sat by the fire for a while, neither speaking. Then he said softly, "I never meant to fall for you." She smiled sadly. "I know. But you did." He looked at her, his eyes filled with emotion. "And I don't want to stop." Her heart ached. She had wanted to hear those words for so long, but now they carried the weight of everything they'd lost. Love isn't enough, Alexander. It has to be built on trust. "Then I'll rebuild it," he said firmly. "Brick by brick, if that's what it takes." His voice. And Rome made her believe he meant it. The next day, he didn't leave. He helped her fix a broken fence, carried groceries, made coffee. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt different, now gentle, healing. Over the following weeks, he kept coming back. Sometimes with food, sometimes just to sit with her. He didn't push or demand anything. He just showed up patiently, quietly. The man once feared across Wall Street was now learning the simple art of showing love. Slowly, Emily began to see the change. The cold businessman she once married was now human, vulnerable, sincere. One afternoon, she found him repairing her old typewriter, the one she thought was broken forever. "It just needed a new ribbon," he said with a shy smile. Her eyes filled with tears. "You remembered?" "I remember everything about you," he said softly. That evening, they sat by the lake watching the sunset. The sky burned gold and pink, reflecting over the calm water. He looked at her and said, "When I first met you, I thought you were a mistake. But now I know you were my second chance." She turned to him, her voice trembling. "Are you really ready to let the past go?" He nodded. "If it means keeping you, yes." Tears rolled down her cheeks, and this time she didn't hold back. She leaned into him, resting her head against his chest. He held her carefully, as if afraid she might disappear again, for the first time. There were no walls between them, no contracts, no lies, no fear. Just two people who had finally learned what love really meant. Months later, when the media discovered their reconciliation, the world expected a public statement. Instead, Alexander announced he was stepping back from his company for a while. Some things he said at a press conference are more important than power. Emily watched the broadcast from their cabin, her heart swelling with quiet pride. He had kept his promise not with grand gestures, but with real change. That evening, when he returned home, she greeted him with a smile. "So, Mr. Knight, what happens now?" He smiled back. "Now we live. No contracts. No expectations. Just us." She reached out, intertwining her fingers with his. "You know, you're not the most feared man in America anymore." He laughed softly. "Good. I'd rather be the man you trust." The fire crackled. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, and for the first time, both of them felt free. Alexander Knight had built his empire with steel and strategy. But it was Levana's quiet love that finally saved him. And Emily Carter, once sold into a life she never wanted, had become the woman who melted the iron heart of America.